Hi, I'm Jennifer Heiss, and I'm from the Plainfield Public Library. And I and my book dragon here are going to do a little presentation for you on how, sorry, my cameraman is giving me a funny look.
Dragon?
Book dragon.
Oh.
Book dragon.
Okay. Sorry.
I and my book dragon are going to get a little presentation on how to grow sprouts and microgreens in your kitchen. This is actually easier than it sounds, and trust me on this, you don't even have to have a long attention span. If it's not a book, I don't have a long attention span for it. If you picked up your kit at the library, I believe we still have a couple left over at the library right now. If you picked up your kit, you'll find that in it, there's a pamphlet with all the instructions and also a list of resources for learning more about sprouts and microgreens. It also has one of two microgreens self-watering setups, either the rectangular one or the circular one. Both of these are made, as you may have noticed, out of recycled takeout containers. You'll also find a piece of cardboard. We'll use that for the microgreens. And I moved my glass jar over here. And a quart jar. You don't have to use a quart jar, and some of the quart jars actually are going to be jars like spaghetti sauce jars, and that's fine. But you do want to use a jar that's big enough to hold all the sprouts that are going to happen, because this is what happens when you put a third of a cup of mung beans in a pint jar. It's still good, it just looks kind of funny, and it stops growing pretty quickly. You'll also have a package of microgreen seeds mix. This is a commercial microgreen seeds mix, and we'll talk about what's in it later. A bag of dirt. Bag of dirt. This is actually more than you're going to need, but since you throw away the dirt at the end of each microgreen section, you'll be able to do it more than once. Some paper towels. You could use regular paper towels for this, but because we're a library, we get our paper towels in these trifolds, and they work really well. And a package with screening and rubber bands that we're going to use when we sprout our sprouts.
No.
I'm sorry. Let me introduce my son, Benjamin. Say hi to the people, Benjamin. He likes to eat bean sprouts that we get from the store. Sometimes he likes to eat bean sprouts I make at home. This is the bean sprouts that you're probably familiar with, that you buy from the store. But if you buy it in this quantity, you're never going to eat it all by the time it goes bad. So making bean sprouts at home is a lot easier. And will be. Are you going to be a co-host here? Get water from the other room, please. Okay, so these are mung beans. These are the most common type of beans that are used for commercial bean sprouting, and they're easy to get. We'll be using them for bean sprouting, but there are many other things that you can sprout and that you can use to grow microgreens. When people say microgreens, maybe you think about something like this. This is what's technically called a spring mix, and it's little tiny leaves. These are like half-grown lettuces. Sometimes you'll see half-grown red cabbage, Asian vegetables. That's a little bit bigger than what we're talking about with microgreens. Bigger than this, but smaller than this. So here's an example. This container of microgreens is full of the same mix that you have in your packet, And it is about, let's see, we started these on Friday. So these have been growing for about 5 days. We could keep it growing for another 10 days. Eventually, it's going to outgrow this because it's very close together. These greens are not meant to continue to full adulthood. When you plant regular seeds, you need to give them some space so they have room to grow. When we're growing microgreens, we can push them very close together because we just want them to grow straight up and have the first leaf or a couple of leaves come off the seeds. I don't know if there's anybody with questions. Did anybody come into the participants yet?
Yep.
Okay, so let's start by talking about sprouting. Sprouting is something most people might have learned about in the 60s or 70s. It's a pretty simple process. You can get a fancy sprouter that has multiple levels. You can do fancy things, or you can just take a jar and a couple of tablespoons full of beans. And what we're going to do is we're going to use some screening as the top for our jar and hold it on with a rubber band. That's going to allow us to easily drain the water out because sprouting beans like to be damp, but not sitting in water. How do we do that? How do we make that work? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to soak our beans. And the beans that you have, I recommend maybe doing about half of them, no more than that. Okay, if you're not sure you're going to like again, mung or mung beans, you can put them in a small container if you want to, or you can put them right in the jar. It's important because you're going to eat these things raw to make sure everything you use when you're sprouting is scrupulously clean. Okay, so what I like to do is start by soaking my beans overnight. You can soak, some people say 4 hours, some people say 8 hours. 8 hours is about the maximum. You pour water over your beans in a container or in your jar. Whoosh. Ordinary tap water. You want it to be pretty cold though. Okay, and that gives the seeds a chance to get started. Once your seeds have soaked for 4 to 8 hours, you're going to drain them out. You're going to drain out the water. I like to use a strainer, but we could also just pour them into the jar and use that. Use the strainer that we're going to make with the bridal tool. Okay, so pouring it in here. The object is to have, anytime you're doing this, you want to have seeds that are damp, but not sitting in pools of water. Putting it in our jar, putting the rest of it in our jar. This is the disadvantage of this method, is that you then have to put it in the jar yourself. But we're going to rinse it again. Hold on. We're going to rinse it again now that we have soaked it, because that's going to take some of the coating off, and it's going to protect us from any stuff that might be on it. So we fill it up. We can fill it up all the way, we can fill it up part of the way, but at least half of the way. Swirl it around, make sure your beans get nice and rinsed. This is the bridal tool. It looks a lot like what they make scrubbies, bath scrubbies out of, and it is pretty much that. You could use other kinds of cloth. You could even use a piece of cotton, but you want something that's not going to hold a lot of water. So that's why something like this netting is great. They also sell jar lids with little holes in them. They kind of look like the sand sifters we played with when we were kids, that you could use. But this is pretty simple and cheap. You can use either a single thickness or a double thickness. Right here, I'm just going to use a double thickness. I want to place it on top of the jar in such a way that it's about equally sticking out from all sides of the top of the jar. Then I take my rubber band and slide that rubber band over that netting in such a way that it's holding the netting down on all sides. Okay, so the beans can't get away when we turn this upside down, because that's what we're going to do next. You do have 2 rubber bands, just in case one of them breaks. Okay, next step, turn the whole kit and caboodle upside down. Ta-da! Shake it around a little bit. Make sure there's no water dripping, no serious amounts of water dripping out of it. These beans like to stay damp all the time, but if they're sitting in water, they're going to rot. Okay, and you'll know they're rotting because they'll make you'll smell it. You do not want to smell rot coming from here. Okay, that's the next step. Let's do that with some that are a little further along. Like, these are my overachievers here. Again, filling it up with water, making sure I'm using cold water because I don't want to cook them ahead of time. And I'm going to fill that all the way up. Tip it upside down and wait for all of the water to drip out. Drip, drip, drip. Now, what I usually do, once I've gotten most of it to drip out, is I just turn it right back up right again, like that. The only problem is that means when they start to get tight like this, the ones at the bottom get a little bit brown. Another, if you have more room in the jar, that's not going to happen. Another trick you can use, as long as you're not using your dish drainer for most of the day, is to prop it up on your dish drainer like that. And then the water will drop, the water will be sure to drain out. So I started these on Friday. I think I started them on Friday. This is what they look like now. I'll have to put them in a bigger container. I can take them out, put them in a bigger container and let them grow longer. I can grow them, I could grow them for like 7 days without them running out of bean to work from. Because all they need, all the nutrition these little plants need is inside the bean itself. I can also sit around here eating them like this, a little snack. Now, if you have somebody in your family who is immunocompromised, you probably want to not give them raw bean sprouts. Cook them a little bit. They're probably not going to get as long as this, but if they get to about that length, that's a good length. You want to stop them growing, take them, put them in the fridge. Being in the fridge and not being given any more water will stop the growing, but they will begin to decay at that point. Now, mung beans is one of the most popular types of sprouts, but it's not the only type. I would tell you that if you want to start with mung beans, you can buy special, very carefully, specially selected sprouting beans, or you can go down to the local Asian market and get yourself some mung beans there. That's what I usually do. You can also buy different kinds of things that you can sprout. Let's talk about those for a minute. You can use different other kinds of beans. These are adzuki beans. We could also use dried pinto beans, dried black beans. This is an assortment I got just, for sample purposes. Dried chickpeas or garbanzo beans. Yep, these are mung beans. You can sprout lentils. These are French lentils. You get your, make sure you rinse them really well and take out any floaters. If you're going to buy something in a bag from, the grocery store, we don't know how long they've been there. Not that they could go bad, but they might have lost sprouting power. If you want to get fancy, you can also whole peas. Split peas will not work. You could also get fancy. These are daikon radish seeds. Daikon radishes are the big white radishes you sometimes see in the produce department. But any other kind of radish seeds that are suitable for sprouting will work. Don't use, don't go down to the store where they sell regular seeds and get yourself some radish seeds, because they may have a coating on them that makes them unsuitable for sprouting, because you eat the whole sprout. You gotta get a seed that is set up for sprouting. Now these are spicy. What's in the microgreens mix that we're going to be talking about a little later, that includes some radish seeds, and the radish seeds come up really fast, sprout very fast. These are broccoli seeds, not to be confused with mustard seeds that they look a lot like. Make sure you're getting broccoli seeds. And as you can imagine, broccoli sprouts taste a lot like broccoli, only so much more so. You can even sprout sunflower seeds. What's this one? Alfalfa. You see alfalfa sprouts in sandwiches all the time. Alfalfa is very easy to get for sprouting. You can order it on the internet. You can sprout, this is wheat. You can sprout wheat, as long as it's whole wheat, whole barley, whole quinoa. All of those things are sproutable, even buckwheat. And one thing you can get, but I wouldn't recommend starting with unless you already know you like it. Fenugreek, which is used in a lot of cultures as a spice. You can sprout fenugreek. I personally find that it's got a very, very strong odor and smell, odor and taste, and it's not to everybody's taste. Maybe you want to put that off till later. Every time you buy seeds for sprouting, they will tell you on the package generally how long it will take them to sprout and how long they will take to reach maturity. You can also look on a website, or here are two books that are available they're both available on Hoopla digital from the library. I got print copies, but you can get to these on your phone through the Hoopla digital app that will tell you not only how to sprout things, how to use them, and what the results will look like. I especially like this one, year-round indoor salad gardening, because it shows you what it looks like and what the sprout looks like. So this is a photo of pea shoots. So for today, all we're going to do is you're going to soak your mung beans, a certain amount of mung beans, not the whole thing, or you'll never have room in your jar, for a couple of hours. Tomorrow morning, take them, put them in the jar, put the little netting on top, cover, fasten it on with the rubber band, drain the water out. Let it sit there. Every 6 to 12 hours, give it another rinse. Just more water, drain it back out, let it sit on the counter. If you like your sprouts to be nice and white, try to keep it in the dark area in your kitchen. If you like your sprouts to be green, doesn't really matter where you put it. As long as it's someplace that's not too cold and where people aren't going to knock the jar onto the floor. So that's sprouts. Pretty easy. I can start eating my sprouts in 3 days. Some people wait up to 10 days. Microgreens may take a little longer. There's several ways to do microgreen growing. You can put it in a container with some wet paper towels or special microgreen substrate and keep it damp, but then you have to keep close eye on it to make sure it's damp but not sitting in water. You can put it in a container with a little dirt and spray it from time to time. This is an example. This is some of that. And this is another recycled takeout container. I made holes in the bottom. And for my plant saucer, I use the lid. Now, growing microgreens in soil makes them a lot more tolerant. And also, for many people, it's easier to manage because you're not eating the roots. You're just eating the seeds. So how do you do it? I soak my seeds. You don't have to. You put them down on your substrate. For the first couple of 3 to 5 days, you cover it. That's what the cardboard's for. Once they start to get big enough, and as you can see, these things are going to hold up. They're going to push the cardboard up when they're tall enough. Take the cardboard off. Put it someplace where it can get a little bit of light. Turn it from time to time so it doesn't all, you can see here, the light has mostly been coming from this direction. The greens will try to point in the direction the light comes from. However, what we wanted to do here, and let me quick get the name of the guy we stole this idea from. Well, not stole, borrowed, and we want to give him good credit. Mike Van Duzy from Keep On Growing, and his video is in the list of how to do this, gave us the idea for this self-watering microgreens container. Basically, what we're going to do, you see that each container has 2 slots. Those are the slots where we're going to put the wick that brings the water up. The deep container is where the water is going to be. The dirt's actually going to be in the shallow part. Now, you can cut the slots with a knife. I did that here. I'll tell you, it's kind of annoying. We took his advice and used a soldering iron. If you're going to do that, don't use a soldering iron you ever want to use for anything else. It can be hot and dangerous. If you're below the age where you should be allowed to play with hot or sharp things, get somebody else to do it for you, okay? Because I know some of the people watching this may be teenagers. In any case, you want you have 2 parallel slots. And we have our paper towel. What do I do with my paper towel? Hold on. I hid my paper towels. Okay, so we've got our paper towels. We need 2 or 3 of them. Okay, and what we're going to do, and this seems kind of backwards, we're going to take the ends and put them through the container, through the lid, in such a way, let's do it with this one, in such a way that they stick out the top of the lid, and the loop between them, is sticking out the underside of the lid, because the underside of the lid is where we're going to put our dirt. You don't need too much, just enough of the paper towels should stick out the top of the lid so that they can reach the bottom of your container. That's what you're going to do. Then you're going to flatten your paper towel so that it kind of poofs out a little. Make it take up as much space in the lid as you can. And watch what happens when we put water in the bottom. Well, first of all, we probably shouldn't kind of spray ourselves. Okay. When we put this on top, it will immediately start to wick water. That's what paper towels do, right? It's going to wick water right up to the top where we're going to put our dirt. You can see it here and here. Okay. The next step is to put the dirt in. This is a tricky process. You'll want to do it over a trash can or a piece of, or the sink, because you really don't want to be the person who got dirt all over the house and has to vacuum it up. This dirt that we gave you is actually Miracle-Gro seed starting potting mix. It's a special dirt intended for people who are, for when you want to start plants from seed. It's a little lighter, it's a little fluffier. In this case, because it came from Miracle-Gro, it even has some extra nutrients in it to help things grow. I do not recommend using just dirt from the side of the road because you don't know what's in it. Commercially available dirt for something like this that you're going to eat right away is actually a good idea because it has in fact been treated to be relatively sanitary, not to have any nasty germs in it. Okay. You can buy your dirt anywhere you want, but because we're going to eat this relatively quickly, you want to make sure your dirt is sanitized. Now, once you put the dirt in, you're going to have to wet it down. There are several ways to do this. I usually get lazy. I take my little container. Oops, let me get some water. I take my little container and I sprinkle. Okay. But remember that when this is very light dirt, so it tends to float. Okay. And you may also have extra water that soaks down into the bottom half. So you're going to put the water on. Maybe you'll soak it, or you can even use one of these sprayers. Spray, 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 spray. Which you can also use to water your microgreens if you want to water them from the top. The idea is to make sure your dirt is wet, but not sopping wet. See how this is still dirt? This is still dry. We'll put a little more dirt. We're going to put a little more water there so the dirt makes to get nice and damp. We're going to set this aside because it takes maybe half an hour for it to drain. This is one. This is a container of the same type. You can see the water dripped out of the bottom. I had more water in it. This is one that I already did about half an hour ago. And you can see the dirt's pretty much gotten damp. And it'll stay damp because we have this wicking action going on. At this point, you can spread your seeds on if you want to. And I find that my seeds sprout a lot faster My microgreen seeds sprout a lot faster if I soak them for about 4 hours ahead of time. But I can also just open up my bag. This is actually a sample. Let's see, I've got a sample here of broccoli, alfalfa, and organic red clover. I'm going to open this up and I'm going to sprinkle it. Come on. Right on the top here. I'm going to put it fairly densely, okay? Normally you want to spread out your seeds, but here it's good that they're close together because then they'll have no place to grow but up, okay? If you soak your seeds ahead of time, you'll have to mush them around a little with your finger and spread them out when you pour them on the container, on the seed medium. Then you take your cardboard and you set it on top. Seeds like some privacy when they're sprouting in dirt. We're not going to put extra dirt on top because that just makes a mess. Instead, we're just going to put a piece of cardboard on top to give them some privacy. Keep the sun away. Check it every day or so. Make sure there's water in the bottom, in the self-watering part of your container. Eventually, will get to the point where it starts to look like this. Now, what's in the mixture that you got? There's radish seeds, there's broccoli seeds, there's alfalfa seeds, and radish, alfalfa. I want to make sure I give you the right information, right? And it's written here, and mung beans. So there's some of the beans, just like in your sprouting, sprouting. Those will be, as they start to grow, first you'll see it looks really messy. Just like this one. This looks like, you know, somebody's brother's going to come along and say, ew, what's that? Okay, it's going to push up some of the dirt. You want to make sure you spray it or use the underside self-watering to make sure those stay damp, but not sopping wet. It'll start to raise up some of the dirt. You can see that here. Can you get a good look? Can my cameraman get a good picture of that? You see there's dirt actually being lifted up as part of this. You may also see some white things. And at that point, somebody's grandmother is going to say, ew, it's moldy. It usually isn't. Usually what it is tiny little rootlets coming off one of these. Let me just pull this out so you can see what the rootlets look like. This is a really long rootlet, but here, see if I can get a good example. Yeah, these look fluffy, but they're actually just the roots coming off from the side. If things start to smell bad, throw it away. If you start to get black residue climbing up, throw it away. Don't eat it if it smells bad. If it tastes bad, don't eat it. Okay? When we go to harvest our microgreens, we do it with scissors. This is like, you're going to harvest. Pull this forward so we can see. You're going to take a little bit of this. See how this is already made a mat of rootlets? And we're just going to take a pinch and snip. Now, I will warn you that when you bite into one of these radish sprouts, it's going to be hot and spicy. So be a little cautious the first time. Lots of green, a little bit of a bite. You can keep, these will not cut and come again. So as you cut them down, eventually you will have cut off all of the microgreens in your container. At that point, you take the dirt that's in there And then we're going to find the roots. Chuck it. You can put it by the side of the road. You can put, if you have a composter, you can put it in the composter. You can even put it in the bottom of another plant container, but don't try to reuse it because it's already been milked of most of its nutrients. Put another paper towel in. And like I said, you don't have to use that kind of paper towel. You can use a regular paper towel. Just fold it. Into thirds is what I recommend. I found is useful. Again, you fold it. You put it through the slots. Flatten it out. Put water in the bottom. You put dirt on top. You add your water. And you've got a whole nother microgreen setup. And all of those things that I talked about that you can use to grow sprouts, you can also grow them as microgreens. If you have any questions, you can drop us an email. You can read through the booklet. You can take a look at some of the videos and the books that are on the back resources. Or you can call us or email us for more suggestions. Plainfield Public Library can be reached at www.plainfieldlibrary.info. This is the Plainfield Public Library in New Jersey, in case you wondered. You can also call us at 908-757-1111 and reach the reference desk at extension 112. Or you can email us at ref at plfdpl.info. Thank you very much for watching our presentation, and I wish you plenty of happy growing. Have a wonderful day.